Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Welcome back. Thanks for listening. This is an eye-opening podcast all about achieving your dreams today. It's all about improving your life, just like Ben Williams did. That's one of the things I like to focus on in this podcast. My background is in NLP, and I'm always fascinated by how people find the motivation to succeed. I think it's a huge part of the energy jigsaw, and I especially like focusing on it in January. So today, we're focusing on mindset and achieving your dreams and improving your life. And Ben is my guest today. He's got an incredible story. He struggled with drug addiction. He battled suicidal thoughts. He then joined the Royal Marines and started to turn his life around and learned all sorts of valuable lessons, which he'll tell you about, and then started to work with a lot of people that you will have heard of, some very famous people in the England football team, the Manchester United football team, Wasps Rugby as well. And Ben is sharing all that he has learned to help you achieve your dreams and improve your life, just like he did. It's January, we need to, and it's a weird January, isn't it? Let's be honest, it's not a normal January. We need to focus on mindset and improving our motivation. So here is Ben Williams with Commando Mindset on Zestology. Recording now. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been we waited a while, haven't we? But here we are.
We are, yeah. And I thought the first question to ask you would be, what is a commando mindset?
That's a great question. And it's a question that I've spent hours sort of deliberating over my answer. A mindset is basically a particular way of thinking, and commando mindset is putting the commando on the front of that and having a particular way of thinking during certain situations. To be a Marine, you're asked to go through many challenges, lots of adversity, lots of difficulty. You're also encouraged to always use your values, always use your genuine intent, your real drive, what is actually inspiring you, courage, determination, all these things. And it's sort of, you wrap it up into this neat little parcel. It's a particular way of thinking when you're challenged. And I like to say with a commando mindset, commando mindset is for a Marine. The only way you can go and really truly access having 100% of that mindset is within the Royal Marines. But that's not to say there's nothing like a parenting mindset, a work mindset, entrepreneur's mindset, a friendship mindset. And it's just this way of thinking that the commando is who I am, who we are as commandos, such as values and ethos, our drive, I believe is within all of us. And it's not a particular person which goes into the Marines necessarily. It's a particular person that gets drawn out, what gets brought out of us during commando training. And some of the messaging within the book is applicable to everyone in life because, you might not go through the gates of the Commando Training Centre, but we all have it within us to have that particular way of thinking. And that's really where the commando mindset sort of stems from.
Yeah. Because I suppose it's all very well having a good mindset when the sun's out and life is good and you're not being challenged. But what you want is that commando mindset for when the proverbial shit hits the fan and you really need it.
Yeah. And you think of the military, you think of obviously Afghan and Iraq are in recent thoughts and going through arduous training, getting wet, muddy, running around, all those types of things that are neatly associated and rightly with the military. However, that mindset you sort of mentioned there is the same mindset present when you're training for a marathon and you can hear a bottle of red wine clunking around in the kitchen and you can smell some sort of pasta bake in the oven and it all feels quite cozy. And it's like it is now. It's cold. You get those wet days. It's dark and it's tapping away. You've had a long day at work. The Commando mindset inside is that ability to go, I don't want to go for this training run. And I know I'm not going to perform to the highest standard on this training run that I want to, but I'm still going to go and do it. And it's that ability to go through a process where it's not easy, it's not nice, it's not always comfortable, but we have to continuously go through the process. Jocko Willink, who wrote Extreme Ownership, said about it's better to go through the motions than not go through the motions at all. And again, the Commando mindset really sort of sits on that as it's better to train when it is raining. It is better to train when it is cold, because it's not testing you physically, it's testing you mentally.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing about harnessing that resilience of what we can grow forward, which is what I speak a lot about in the book, is get out when it hurts most.
Yeah. Well, talking of the uncomfortable, I'm sitting in a very warm spare room, but it looks like you're in a shed or something. You got a big coat on.
You know what? I've had to come into the office today, and because we're opening up tomorrow. And so I'm actually in the office. This is our decked out sort of area.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. But the heating's been off for a month, isn't it? So
Right.
I'm sat in a down jacket trying to warm. But for those listening, the Commando mindset is to be thinking clever as well, isn't it? When you're cold, put on a jacket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So look, let's get into the nitty gritty of some of the techniques in a moment. But before that, tell me about your story here and why you are qualified to talk about being a commando.
Well, being a commando helps for a start. So, that decision was made for me years ago. Do you know what? My parents had a bit of an ugly divorce. So I used to spend every 2 weeks with with my dad. And one of the things we used to go to was the Portsmouth Royal Marines Museum. For some reason, he'd take us there, or he'd take us to the Parachute Regiment Museum. Just seemed to go around all these military places. And I became quite obsessed with the Royal Marines. But that was at the age of sort of 7, 8 years old. And unfortunately, life just lost its way up to that point and hit my teens. And then for some reason decided that I was going to hit drugs instead of anything relatively sane, and started to go really off the beaten track. And I found myself working as a nightclub bouncer and got myself into some serious problems working in that role. Lost my job there because I was a bit too hot-headed, and eventually found myself in a situation where I just was questioning the reason I'm here. No job, unemployed, addicted to drugs, just wanted out. And I remember driving for ages thinking about how I was going to sort of get rid of myself. What's my way out? What's my exit strategy for not being here anymore? Really depressed and not in the right frame of mind whatsoever. And then I just bottled it. I don't know why I bottled it. I don't know what happened, but I ended up back at home, and I can't even put my finger on it, whether it was that day or that week. I was on the old sort of glitchy new version of, or the first version of YouTube, and just by chance saw an advert for the Royal Marines, and it was an old video. And that was it. It was like this light bulb went off in my head. And I think for me, the thing that had held me back from going into the Marines earlier was courage. I just didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could commit to something so difficult. After seeing that video, I managed to clear my life up, and a year later I was at the amazing gates of the Commando Training Centre and went on and did 10 years as a Royal Marine.
So when did you leave the Royal Marines then?
I left officially on paper last June because I was medically discharged, unfortunately. There's an incident that happened in Afghanistan where a bit of my hearing went missing. And I tried to hide it for several years, but then unfortunately got caught out on a hearing test, and I was pretty much showing the door within sort of 12 months of being found out, which is fine. You can't have bad hearing, and I did my best to hold on. I managed to hit my decade, but it's a career, as much as I probably miss it some days, it's a career that I know made me, and it's a career that showed me what was possible next. It's why I talk about this commando mindsets within us all. If you can beat drugs, you can join the elite. I've had some great highs and some many, many lows, traveling the world, being on operations. I've trained recruits myself, which was an absolutely inspiring part of the journey. And I found my way to Civvy Street quicker than I probably expected, and not how I expected it. But I knew I had it within me to do something new in life. I knew I had it within me that I could go on and create something new, which is exactly what I did. I set up a coaching and consultancy business. I didn't know squat about business. I didn't even know how to spell entrepreneur. And I found myself into that way of thinking and doing something for me. And I've grown 2 businesses since then. And it's, again, a reflection to go, this is all inside us. You should never question yourself. You should never think I'm not good enough, that other person's doing it, they're better than me. Everyone has it within ourselves to go and do something, and to speak about the Commando mindsets, to draw out the values, to draw out the ethos, to draw out that resilience in others so they can go on and achieve similar things, if not better things than myself.
Right. So you obviously did the training, and then you went to Afghanistan, and that was that the only time that you that presumably that wasn't the only time that you kind of went into battle?
No, I was fortunate enough that although we did some other trips around the world, I was part of the sort of wind down of Afghan. So I got to Afghan. We had quite a horrific tour out there. And then when we came back, I was put on command courses, and that was it. The war was over. And it was a case of going around the world and sort of finding other things to do in the shape of exercises and different trips. But I caught the frightening end of what Afghanistan was. And how the war at the point I went was very much focused on avoiding IEDs and bombs in the ground and mines, as opposed to just fighting the Taliban. And there was a real psychological sort of torment with that, wondering if the next step's your last, seeing it when it happens. It's, when you're in a battle, you actually have quite a lot of control. You don't have any control. I actually reference it quite a lot to what we're going through at the moment, where you're in your bases, you're relatively safe, but every time we step out the door, we're facing an invisible threat. There's an invisible enemy out there, which is to all of us right now, COVID. It's the same mindset, the Commando mindset. It's the same mindset to go out the door now and think, got to be careful, got to take precautions, got to be careful where I go, got to be careful what I do. And it takes a degree of resilience to build that up in ourselves, to take the risk to go out, to maneuver where you need to go, and everyone's got their own opinion on it, but to me, it's the same way of thinking, which it really develops that way of thinking that we all have this mindset. I found mine on the battlefield there.
Yeah, it's interesting that talking to you, you've got this book coming out, and I'm hoping that this interview is going to come out pretty much the same week that the book comes out. And as well as that, you've had huge success since you've left the Marines, and you've been consulting with, am I right in saying Wasps and the England and the England football team? Yeah,
we've we've worked with Wasps, we've worked with England, we've been to Manchester United, we've done quite a bit of time with Premier League teams and sort of lower teams. Worked with some professional fighters in the UFC. Also, strangely, elite sport, that's probably where people would stick us. I've been advising to directors and executives within certain banking groups. We work quite closely with Facebook, and it's just been a really interesting journey to this point. And I think the reason most of those opportunities have sort of unfolded is because we've dared to ask. A lot of people don't dare to ask, just knock on the door. So my business partner is also a former Marine, so we're not too afraid of knocking on the door and going, hey, do you want this service? No, go away. Okay, cool, we'll go somewhere else. But I think the first step for many people is asking. Again, that Commando mindset within us all is dare to ask, dare to be. And that helps sometimes take that step, knock on the door, ask that question, leave that job. Who knows what it looks like. But yeah, that's the way I sort of treat it. I think I put that towards why we have some of our successes.
That's great. And what I was going to ask you is, despite all those successes, there sounded like there was a real note of sadness or regret in your voice when you were saying that you did have to leave the Marines.
Yeah, there is. It's not regret, because regret, I think regret's a word that sort of itches on our shoulder of ambition. When you don't go through with the things you are ambitious towards, regret will eat you up afterwards. I think that about regret. I even write about regret in the book. Is we all go through things in our lives, don't we, where we wish we didn't do that. We wish we didn't do this. It's happened. It's been and gone. There's not much more you can do about it. I have regrets from being in the military. There's areas which I wish I applied myself more. I had ambition of going for special forces, and it never came to fruition because of injury. And maybe I regret not training hard enough in a certain particular area for that, but I wouldn't be living the life I live now. And also one of the key things for me is I write about in the book, surround yourself with excellence. I've got great friends from before the military, which I was knocking about with doing bad things, and they're still my friends now. But what I found when I went into the military is I found there was an air of ambition, which was better than mine. There was a values, there was a purpose. There were people which would draw the best out of me. And I was never the best recruit. I was never the worst. I was just that sort of middleman. And when you're surrounded with people like that, it brings out a particular way of thinking. It drives you in a certain manner. And so the biggest thing for me leaving the military was not seeing those people every day, not being around that caliber of person who constantly brings that out of you, whether they're taking the mick out of you, taking the piss, or whether they're with you on a doorway as you're going through to fight enemy combatants. You know, it's hard to come across a group of people like that. And I think, you know, I have seen it in the civilian world where it's like, really, people actually treat each other like this? But I've also seen it on the other side where people treat one another incredibly. And so, yeah, there's an air of sadness is you're just not around those people which brought the best out of you.
I suppose really it's just like the with that camaraderie, it's like the best of days, isn't it? You know, I mean, even when you're in Afghanistan in the middle of what must be hell, you know, having read so many books about, for example, the Second World War, and people then said it really was the best of days and the worst of days, because whilst you lived in fear every second of every day, it brought you together as a community. And that's hard to replicate, I guess, when you're not a commando. Yeah, it is. And I work with a lot of people now, one-on-one coaching, group coaching. I work with a lot of people, and I always express that from the start. Is you're not going to be a Marine. You're not going to have that 100% commando mindset, because you have to go through all that training, you know, to have a team like a group of Marines who, by the way, aren't a perfect outcome. They have lots of flaws themselves. You can't do that without doing this particular training. However, you can begin to think in certain ways that can replicate elements of that high-performing team, you know, values, shared vision, purpose, goals, actually listening to one another, authenticity, you know, being open with one another. People are so afraid to be open with one another these days. If I'm shit, I'll tell you I'm shit. If I'm feeling really good, I'm going to tell you I'm feeling really good. But I've laughed, I reckon, the hardest I've ever laughed has been in moments where you just think, we should be crying right now. And one of the Royal Marines' values is cheerfulness in the face of adversity. And I remember there was this really clear moment for me. We'd been on an operation in Helmand, and it was a testing operation, but somehow we'd all walked away unscathed. And we were in our sticks, which is basically lines of troops waiting to get on the helicopters. And we're in the middle of these cornfields, and everyone was alert. We knew the enemy were around, and all we needed was these 2 Chinooks and a Sea King, I think it was, or a Merlin, to come in and pick us up, and then we'd fly off. So about 60 Marines sat in this field. And our helicopter came in and started running towards it, and you're sort of zigzagging along. And I was carrying a ladder. I was carrying my machine gun, which was a light machine gun at the time, LMG. My kit, I think your kit on average weighs about 80 to 100 pounds. And you just feel like your legs are falling into the stodgy mud. And they get nearer and nearer the helicopter. And then all of a sudden, the enemy just open up on us, and you could hear the rounds spitting through the rotor blades, and you could hear it hitting the helicopter. And there's 2 helicopters behind us, and you could literally see it just spatting off the floor. And it was like, fuck, get on it. Somehow you find that extra 10% to run. And I'm running along with this fucking ladder. And as I get towards the tail ramp of the Chinook, I just slipped and jammed, as you can imagine, the 2 runs of the ladder. I jammed the ladder into the into the tail ramp of the Chinook, where there's like 20 Marines behind me trying to get on board. And I just flipped over and landed flat on my face. And people were like, man down, man down. I was like, I'm not man down. People dragging me onto the helo. It was just an absolute clusterfuck. Yeah, I was lying on the floor of this Chinook as I've been dragged on like a casualty, holding this fucking ladder, laughing to myself, and then other people laughing, and the rounds are still coming through the cab as we're taking off, and it was like, oh my god, we're going to get hit in a second. And just in hysterics, because it was just like everyone thinks, oh, we're just running along, probably got no sleeves on, we've got tattoos everywhere, really. And I just like wedged this ladder into the helicopter. Did you rescue the ladder, or did the ladder get left?
Of course I brought the ladder. You know, that's one of our famous mottos, save the ladder. I managed to drag the ladder on board.
So, I mean, that's amazing. I really felt like I was there with you, you know, and it didn't feel like a humorous situation, but I can imagine how in many situations, cheerfulness, and actually I interviewed someone who wrote a book about humor and how it helps in every area of our lives. One of the things that stood out, I thought, you know, since your book's coming out in January and this podcast going out in January, a lot of us think about the year ahead, especially 2021. We were able to say goodbye to 2020, which is great as well. One of the things that is in the kind of blurb for your book is about achieving your dreams. You've already spoke a little bit about that, but maybe we could look into that a little bit more. One of the things you suggested was dare to ask. What are the other things that you might recommend people who want to achieve their dreams in 2021 and for some reason haven't been able to in 2020, maybe because of lockdown or something else?
Yeah, I think first off, I think there's everyone's got to have that internal integrity first to go. And it's something I was actually speaking to my wife about the other day is COVID doesn't know any boundaries. You know, don't kid yourself. You're not going to get to the 31st of December and then go into the 1st of January and be like, hey, new year, new me. Because unfortunately, the knock-on effect of this horrible thing is still going to be around, isn't it? But that's not to say life can't be lived. And I found one of the most, and I don't mean to say that as in a downplay it, negative way of thinking it. It's reality, isn't it? So that's the first step. What can you do next year that is what drives reality? What can you actually put your hands on next year for what we go through? One of the most inspiring things I think I've noticed this year with the businesses and people I've worked with the amount of people which turn around and gone, this thing's actually woken me up a little bit, that I was concentrating on the wrong things before the pandemic. I was focusing too much on work and not enough on my children. And I was the same. We're not all perfect here. And I was exactly the same. I was neglecting time I could have had with my kids more than I should have been. And, you know, the first few weeks of the pandemic, we're riding bikes, we're checking dipsticks in the engine, and just being just dad and family. And I think so many people woke up to that. And what I feel that's linked to is a lot of us woke up to what actually truly inspires us. So much of, actually, I want to go do this, or I want to go and work here, or I want to do this for me. And the pandemic's a short-term thing, isn't it? It's taking away a bit of our freedom. It's not nice. In fact, it's really shit. But it will one day go away. It will one day go away. In whatever form that is, you will have your freedom back. And 2021 looks likely that we're going to have an era of freedom. And I like to speak to people and say, what has inspired you over the last year that you could now put into action next year? What did you neglect, which you wish you didn't neglect? How seriously did you take your health and fitness? What about the time you had with your family? Do you want to go and grow your own business? Well, now's the time to do it. And that's the way I sort of look at 2021 is it's not about overnight New Year's resolutions. It's about, I learned something about myself last year. What can I actually physically do? And often it's driven by what I feel inspires us. So for me, this thinking comes from back in Afghanistan and spending a very lonely time, 10 minutes on a roof, getting shot at by a Taliban marksman on my own, unable to get off the roof and no one able to get on the roof. And a very scary moment. I remember being in my bed that evening thinking, Christ, that was really fucking close. And the bullet's so close to hitting the wood in front of you, thinking, this is me, waiting for it to be me. And it's like this wake-up call. And I remember lying in my bed that night, looking up at the stars, it's completely more dramatic than it is over here. Like anywhere with the least amount of light pollution in the UK, is Afghan's like 5 times that. It's amazing. And I remember it put me into such perspective to go home and do something. Go home and tell someone you haven't told you love them that you actually do love them. Go and eat that pizza you've been putting off and all that little crazy things. Go and explore this country that you said you would. And come back and yeah, I hit some of those things and I didn't hit some of those things, but it just jogged this way of thinking. Yeah. I think for the pandemic, it's done a lot for us to have that jogged thinking for next year to go, I'm going to do something for me. And that really starts with do something that inspires you. What is truly going to inspire you and what you want to do, not what you think you should be doing. That's where I start anyway.
Yeah. Interrupting this podcast for a moment to talk about, well, living stronger and boosting the immune system and helping the digestion. You know, it all starts in the gut. And as you know, my podcast partners here on Zestology, I only have podcast partners that I believe in, I really think are good. And today's definitely falls in that category. P3OM are probiotics that I take, They improve digestion and nutrient absorption. They help your digestive tract and immune system stay strong and healthy. And I just think that probiotics, a good probiotic, is a really good idea at the moment as well. I just think there's a few things that you want to be taking. Probably you want to be taking some magnesium, like Magnesium Breakthrough. Probably a little bit of vitamin C and zinc. I take that every day. And probably a good probiotic like P3OM, one that stays in the stomach and survives the stomach acid. Okay, so it survives in your body but doesn't compete with the other strains of probiotic that might be going on in your stomach as well. You're as protected as possible from the growth of bad bacteria and other pathogens when you take P3OM. If you're interested, head to bioptimizers.com/zestology and use the code zestology10. So all the details are at bioptimizers.com/zestology. And if you're in the UK, head to bioptimizers.co.uk and you can use the same code, zestology10. I hope that helps with your immune system. I do feel like January is a time of kind of renewal and kind of thinking about the year ahead, and never more so than at the moment with all the challenges that are going on. It really has been the most extraordinary couple of months, and I just hope that 2021 continues to get better and better than 2020 as well. And boosting the immune system is all part of that. Bioptimizers.com/zestology. You'll get your code there. You'll get your discount. Let me know how you get on. Now, back to the podcast. I'm a big sports fan and I work at Sky Sports, and I've seen some of the teams that you've been working with. Looks like Man United are doing all right since you work with them.
Oh, do you know what?
Are you going to take all the credit for that?
No, definitely not. So it's a strange one, the Man United story, because I came across a couple of them with England. They didn't actually visit us when they came down to the Commando training centre to do their little weekend. None of the Man United players came, and I dug to the bottom of it with Harry Kane one evening. They're like, "Oh, Jose won't sign him off." I was like, "Really? All right, yeah." They didn't come down, and someone else didn't come down. Chelsea didn't get the sign off as well. I can't remember who was in charge of Chelsea yet. I can't remember who it was back then. But I met them since when we had a few get-togethers.
It wasn't Frank Lampard. It was a bit further back.
No, it was Conte. Conte? Is that right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Antonio Conte.
Yeah. So he was there. So I didn't really get to meet many of them, and then I met a couple of them afterwards. But actually, the Man United stuff came around, working with Casey Stoney and the ladies, and we did some work with the ladies before they began their new sort of rollout as Man United ladies, and then we ended up working with some of the academies. And so the Man United work's been good. It's been on and off, but yeah, not too much involvement with the first team. They're just off on one, aren't they? People are in and out all the time. It's very. I know a lot of people around the club, as in work with some of the physios and get involved with the keepers, but that's
and it's good. And I suppose from your perspective, I've always been fascinated by sports psychology, and I started off writing books on NLP and, studying neuro-linguistic programming, which has been used so much with sport. And one of the great attractions of working with sport is that it's one of the few areas where you've got tangible results that you can compare against what happened before. It's very hard if you're working with someone who's like, I don't know, an entrepreneur or something, to say, all right, well, they might be making a bit more money, but there's so many other ways to measure progress. But with sport, you have results and you've got scores and you've got data, haven't you?
Yeah. And do you know what? There's a huge parallel between the forces and sports as well. I remember being sat around a little fire with Harry Kane, and we were just having a really normal conversation around 1 o'clock in the morning, just drinking really shit tea. And but I remember thinking that the conversation was so normal. In fact, so normal that I was moaning to him about holiday prices that I've just paid to go to Lanzarote. And he just like humbly was like, yeah, $4,000, that's quite a lot. And then I thought, oh, he probably pays it for a meal, didn't he? Yeah. But we had this conversation where I asked him the cliche question of, what's it like to score in front of 80,000, 90,000 people at Wembley? And I've heard these interviews before, I've heard him talk about this type of stuff, and they deliver it in their very footballer response, didn't they? But this moment felt different, and he was just like, I can't tell you how. It was a completely different response. And it was along the lines of, I can't tell you how good it feels. It's just nothing will ever beat it. And we had this conversation around it. And then he asked me, he's like, what's it like to go to war? And we just teed it off. It was just a nice conversation. It was one of the first times I realized that those two high performing cultures are very, very, very linked. And I remember him saying, "Oh yeah, but it's different for you guys." Because I made the point of, high performance, your end, you're always in the eye. He said, "Yeah, but it's not life and death." I said, "Well, it is strangely for you, because if you look at David Beckham after the World Cup many years ago, his life for 4 years was hell, absolute hell. And no, that's not life or death, but it's not nice." And so there's this link between us, and the biggest link, and you'll know this as well, is when it's over. And that was a big thing for me coming away from the military. I began speaking to more and more retired athletes, because we had this thing in common where it's like, tap's been turned off of, always been around the right people, great team cohesion, set of values, a purpose, a goal, literally in some cases, it's not there anymore. And that feeling of loneliness and that feeling of lack of purpose can really eat at us. And that's part of what I do now, is to speak to those people, to be like, it's not over. It's just part of our journey, and now we move on to the next.
Good. Yeah, that's great. Particularly important with people in sport, I think, where they get treated in such a kind of godlike way, often, like Harry Kane.
Yeah.
Now, what is one book that has inspired you? It's a question I ask everyone. I didn't give you advance warning of this, so don't worry if you haven't got anything to hand. But obviously, you'll bring your own book out. But is there anything that has particularly had an impact on you in terms of one thing that you've read that you've loved, or you would recommend, or even something you're reading at the moment?
Yeah, I've got two. So the first one was one which sort of inspired me to start writing, which is Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last. And that kind of,
I love that.
That kind of really, that's where I first thought, there's more to this sort of military stuff than just writing books about experiences in war. Let's help people understand our mindset. And that kind of kicked me off. But I think one of the most impactful books I've read and listened to time and time again is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I know it's very cliche. A lot of people do come up with it, and lots of people say it, but that for me really changed the way I negotiate, the way I have a conversation. It changed the way I had a relationship with my wife and my kids and my friends. And that's probably had the biggest impact on me, that book. I used to listen to it running like that. Yeah.
So
Great book.
The test of time, hasn't it?
Yeah. And that goes to show its value, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that one definitely drives me.
And then what about one tip for living with more energy, vitality and motivation? People listening to this at the start of the year already talked a little bit about kind of achieving dreams and goal setting. What about energy and vitality for this new year?
For me, it's exercise. It's got to be exercise, and that's not going out and thrashing yourself for like 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers. It's getting out and being in that fresh air, doing a couple of kilometers or a couple of miles that make you feel fatigued. They release those endorphins. They release that serotonin. If you do it with someone else, oxytocin, you get that dopamine hit. You're getting into those chemicals out there to make us feel good. But the biggest thing is it's also time to yourself. I choose running, and I choose running in a scenic area. I'm very fortunate. I live in Devon, so there's lots of places I can go. But it's time on my own. All of us are locked in. We've got families, we've got friends. We're stuck inside our houses quite a lot at the moment. Exercise isn't just going to the gym, isn't just running around high performing. It's time to yourself. And when you're looking for well-being and health and vitality, you're getting that exercise, but you're also getting that ability to clear out the mind a bit and have some time with the person who's important, which is you. That's where I find it.
Yeah, I agree. So it's almost amazing how well it works in elevating mood levels.
Yeah, it's so good for your mental health, well-being, and physically, obviously.
Yeah, which is, of course, the great irony in being locked down for a few months, when you can't get out and exercise. But there you go. Yeah,
burpees. We're all good at burpees now, aren't we?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I really do hate burpees, but there's other exercise that I can do to supplement burpees. Look, good luck with the book. I really hope it does well. As I say, we'll make sure this comes out at the time that it's launched. It's available everywhere. I know it's available for pre-order as we record this. It's called Commando. What's the full title and subtitle?
Commando Mindset. Find your motivation, realize your potential, achieve your goals.
Fantastic. Really good luck with it, and I look forward to hearing how it's going. Maybe we'll chat again once it's come out.
Thanks for having me on, Tony. Cheers.
Thank you, Ben. And if you fancy a Commando gut as well as a Commando mindset, do you see what I did there? You can head to byoptimizers.co.uk and use the code Zestology10 for 10% off all their supplements, but especially my podcast partner of the month, which is P3OM. P3OM. It's probiotics that will help you improve your energy and get a little bit more focused, get a little bit sharper as well, which with this theme of motivation that we're looking at in January on Zestology is particularly appropriate. Many other probiotics in the market don't survive your own stomach acid, but P3OM is fully tested to make sure the probiotic strains not only survive in your body, but also don't compete with each other. You wouldn't want that. So you're protected from the growth of bad bacteria. We know how important immunity is at the moment. I really don't think there's much we can control about COVID-19 at the moment. We can obviously do what we can in terms of masks and washing hands and just staying out of harm's way and all the rest of it, even though it's just been dragging on for so long. But what we really need is to boost our immune system so that when anything does attack it, we're in the best position possible to fight it off. And that really starts with a good immune system. Good probiotics, a few good vitamins as well, the kind of thing that we often talk about on Zestology. All the details are on a special dedicated page, which is byoptimizers.com/Zestology. You get the discount there as well. byoptimizers.com/Zestology. That is spelled the American way with a Z. And if you want more information in the UK, you can go to byoptimizers.co.uk. Use that code Zestology10 for 10% off. Right, I'm still walking around in West London near my home, and I'm going to go home because it's quite cold and I haven't worn my jacket while recording this podcast because it rustles, and that's very annoying to listen to when you're listening to a podcast. So I'm out here in just a flimsy little t-shirt recording it. I'm kind of Wim Hofing it up really. I'm recording this podcast for you, for Zestology. Thanks for listening. Next week, looking at the weird and wonderful world of dreams. I'll see you then.